The night I stayed over at my friend's house, something happened that I never expected. Something so unusual, so quietly seismic, I couldn't keep it to myself. It was supposed to be a simple sleepover. That's what I kept telling myself as I tossed my phone charger into my canvas tote and climbed into the passenger seat of Lila's Jeep. Nothing major, just like old times. We'd been texting all week about how we never saw each other anymore, how adulthood had scattered us like loose change. So when she said, "Come over, we'll binge that true crime series and order Thai," it felt like a lifeline. We hung out, laughed until our ribs hurt, and lost track of time. By the time the credits rolled on the third episode, it was past 2 a.m., and the idea of driving the 45 minutes home felt impossible. Lila shrugged, kicked her feet up on the coffee table. "Crash here. My parents are in Lisbon for Dad's conference. House is ours." She said it so casually, but my stomach did a small, traitorous flip. Maybe it was because I hadn't been to her place since sophomore year of college, back when things between us still felt easy, unweighted by the years we'd spent drifting. Lila had always been the kind of friend who made you feel known, like she could hear the thoughts you hadn't said aloud. Lately, though, there was a distance I didn't know how to name. I smiled, said sure, and decided not to overthink it. The house was exactly the same. Wide glass entry, quiet hallways, the faint scent of eucalyptus and clean linen. It had warmth, but not the kind that came from laughter echoing off the walls. It was the quiet kind, like the house had learned to hold its breath. While Lila went to grab extra pillows from the linen closet, I stood in the hallway with my tote slung over one shoulder, scanning the space like I was walking through a half-remembered dream. That's when I saw it, Elias's door, closed as always. I hadn't seen Elias, Lila's older brother, since graduation. 5 years older than us, he'd always seemed like he belonged to a different stratosphere, confident in a way that didn't need to announce itself. He'd never made me feel unwelcome exactly, but there was something about him that put me on edge. Like he could see the shape of your thoughts before you'd finished forming them. Lila reappeared, tossing me a pillow. "You can sleep in Elias's room. He's in Berlin for work, some architecture thing. Won't be back till next week," I hesitated. "You sure he won't mind?" She grinned. "He'll never know. Spare blankets are in the closet, bathrooms across the hall." And then she was gone, disappearing into her own room with a yawn. The moment I opened Elias's door, a familiar scent hit me, cedar and something sharper like graphite and cold air. The room was tidy but lived in. A half-empty coffee mug on the desk, sketchbooks in uneven stacks, a navy sweater draped over the back of a chair. I hadn't even known he'd moved back in after his divorce. I brushed my teeth, changed into the oversized t-shirt and shorts I'd packed, and slid under the covers. The sheets were cool, the air unmoving. I stared at the ceiling, trying to drift off. That's when I heard the front door. A soft click, the faint jingle of keys, the sound of boots on hardwood, measured, unhurried. Not Lila's light-socked shuffle. My chest tightened. Lila had said Elias was in Berlin. The steps passed my door and kept going. Silence. I let out a shaky breath, but the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt expectant, like the house itself was listening. I turned over, watching the thin lines of moonlight stretch across the dresser. The shadows reminded me of nights as a kid, staring at shapes in the dark and imagining they might move. Only this time I wasn't imagining. Elias was home. I had heard it. I had felt it. And I couldn't shake the sense that something was different about tonight. The air felt heavier, and he still hadn't come into his room. Part of me expected him to. It would have made sense. This was his bed I was lying in, his room I was pretending to belong to. But instead, he was somewhere else in the house, awake, maybe thinking or maybe not. Maybe he didn't even remember I was here. Still, I couldn't get comfortable. The pillows smelled like him, faint cedar, now deeper, more grown. It was the kind of scent you only caught when you were close to someone. The kind that lived in their sheets, their clothes, the back of their neck, and right now it surrounded me, threading through the quiet like an unspoken question. Eventually, I sat up and told myself I was going to the bathroom just to clear my head, maybe splash some water on my face. But when I opened the door, I caught a faint glow from the living room. The television was on low, casting shifting shadows on the walls. And there he was. Elias. He sat on the couch, one arm resting along the back, a glass of something dark in his other hand. He wore a black t-shirt and gray sweatpants, both fitting in ways I wished I didn't notice. His hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it. The muscles in his forearm flexed slightly as he raised the glass to his lips. I froze. Maybe he hadn't seen me yet. I could still slip back into the bathroom, pretend I hadn't come out at all. But something about the way he sat there, quiet, distracted, yet somehow alert, held me in place. Moving felt like it might break something fragile. Then his voice cut through the air, low and smooth. Couldn't sleep? I stepped forward, my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. Not really, he didn't turn. Just motioned toward the couch with his chin. Didn't receivables mean to keep you up? You didn't, I said quickly. The bed's nice, just not used to it. Now he looked at me. His gaze landed slow and deliberate, the kind that made your skin warmer just by being seen. Didn't think you'd actually sleep in my room. Lila said it was fine. He smirked faintly. Of course she did. I stood there in the hallway, suddenly aware I was only wearing a t-shirt and shorts, the cold floor under my toes. The air smelled faintly of his soap mixed with the oak from his drink. You can sit, he said finally, tilting his head toward the other side of the couch. I don't bite. I gave a small laugh and crossed the room, lowering myself into the cushions, trying not to overthink the closeness. There was space between us, but not much. Not enough to ignore how his knee angled toward mine, or how his shirt stretched slightly when he moved. What are you watching? I asked. Some architecture documentary, he said, barely glancing at the screen. Wasn't really paying attention. The flicker from the TV washed his features in blue and gray. I noticed the faint scruff on his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. He looked older than I remembered. Not in a bad way, just more real. He took a sip of his drink, then held the glass out to me. Want some? I hesitated, then took it. Our fingers brushed brief but sharp like a spark. I tasted the cold bite of whiskey before handing it back. You've changed, he said after a pause. What do you mean? More confident. You used to avoid eye contact. Maybe you were scarier back then. He smiled slowly. Maybe. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It sat between us, steady, unhurried. I wanted to ask why he hadn't gone to his room, why he looked at me the way he did, but I didn't. The moment felt delicate, and I didn't want to break it. The night outside had deepened into pure black. The only light came from the TV flickering across his face. He didn't feel like the Elias I used to know. Sharp edges, no danger, just presence, heat. A kind of attention that made me aware of every inch of myself. We didn't move. We just sat there side by side, letting the silence fill the space like it had always been meant to. Eventually, I said, I should probably head back. He nodded, but neither of us moved right away. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I stood, my legs unsteady. He watched me, his gaze unreadable. Good night, Elias. Good night. I walked back to his room, the floor cool under my feet. I slid under the covers. The scent of cedar stronger now, like it had settled into my skin. I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the way he'd looked at me, the way the silence had felt like a conversation we hadn't needed words for. Sometime before dawn, I heard his door open and close. Soft footsteps in the hall. Then nothing. The next morning, Lila was in the kitchen, humming as she made coffee. Sleep okay? She asked. Yeah, I lied. Your brother's home early, she frowned. Elias, he texted me from the airport. Flight got in at 1. Did he wake you? No, I said, just heard him come in, she shrugged. He's weird about his room. Probably slept on the couch. I nodded, but I knew better. The sheets smelled like him. The pillow still held the shape of his head. I didn't tell her about the whiskey, or the way he'd looked at me, or how the silence had felt like the beginning of something I wasn't ready to name. Some secrets, I decided, were better kept in the dark. The house was too quiet for a Saturday night, the kind of quiet that presses in on your ears after the music stops. I sat on the edge of the couch, legs tucked under me, staring at the coffee table like it might speak if I waited long enough. The bottle of cider Elias had handed me earlier was still half full, condensation pooling at the base. I hadn't taken more than a sip. It wasn't the drink keeping me anchored. It was the way he'd looked at me when he passed it over, like he'd been waiting for an excuse to cross the room. Elias was in the armchair across from me, one ankle crossed over his knee, fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the armrest. He hadn't said much since the others left. Just, "You don't have to go," when I stood to grab my jacket. I'd sat back down. Not because I wanted to stay, but because leaving felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to name. He glanced at me now, that same unhurried half smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You could," he said, voice low, like he was finishing a thought I'd missed. Then nothing. No push, no lean in. Just the quiet stretching between us, thick and warm, like the air before rain. I swallowed. The cider had gone flat on my tongue, but I could still taste the faint bite of apple. His knee was close enough that I could feel the heat of it through my jeans. When he shifted to set his empty bottle down, his shoulder brushed mine, a fleeting contact that lingered longer than it should have. His hand hovered near his jaw afterward, fingers flexing like he wasn't sure where to put them. I stood. Not because I wanted to leave, but because staying felt like stepping off a ledge I couldn't see the bottom of. I started, then stopped. Sleep. Water. Anything. Elias just nodded, letting me go without a word. I felt his eyes on my back all the way down the hall. My room was dark, the sheets still rumpled from earlier. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, trying to quiet the noise in my head. But it wouldn't settle. Not with his voice looping through my thoughts. Not with the memory of that look, like he'd seen something in me he'd been carrying for years. The house creaked around me, old wood settling into the night. I was drifting, caught in that hazy space between awake and asleep. When I heard it, the soft turn of the doorknob. Deliberate. Slow. I didn't move. The door eased open, a sliver of hallway light cutting across the floor before disappearing. Footsteps measured and quiet. The air shifted, heavier now, like the room itself was holding its breath. The door clicked shut. Stillness. Then breathing. Not mine. My eyes adjusted to the dark, tracing the faint outline near the bed. I knew it was Elias before he spoke. The mattress dipped as he sat, moving like he'd done this 100 times, like he belonged here. Warmth reached me through the blanket, even before he touched me. His hand settled lightly above my waist, a pause, like he was asking permission without words. "You're not asleep," he murmured, voice rough with something unspoken. I turned toward him. His face was close, eyes catching the dim glow from the crack under the door. "I don't know if I should be," I said. His gaze searched mine. "I've been thinking about this. About you. About whether you've been thinking about it too." My throat tightened. "I didn't think you remembered me." "I never forgot," he said. Simple, final. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we hadn't said in the years since high school, since the night of graduation, when I'd stood on the football field in that stupid red gown, laughing too loud, pretending I wasn't looking for him in the crowd. He leaned in slowly, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His lips met mine, careful, warm, certain. Not rushed. Just there, like it had been waiting. I felt it in my chest first, a trembling recognition that hit before my brain caught up. Elias stayed close, his hand steady on my waist, grounding me. It didn't feel like a conquest. It felt like a beginning. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against mine. Our breathing was uneven, fragile. "I've wanted to tell you that since the night you graduated," he said, voice low, like the words had been buried too long. You were standing under the bleachers, laughing at something Mia said. That red gown looked ridiculous. You looked... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. I laughed, a small shaky sound. You were there? I was always there, he said. Just didn't know how to say it. My hands were still gripping the blanket. I loosened my fingers, let one drift up to touch his jaw. The stubble there was rough under my fingertips. Real. I thought you didn't even know my name, I said. I knew it, he said. I just didn't know what to do with it. He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper. His hand slid up my back, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, steady and fast. Mine matched it. We didn't speak for a long time. Just breathed. Just existed in the dark, in the quiet, in the space we'd finally stepped into. Eventually he pulled back, just enough to look at me. I'm not good at this, he said. At saying things, at any of it. You're doing okay, I whispered. He smiled, small, real. Stay? I nodded. He kicked off his shoes, climbed in beside me, fully clothed. The bed was narrow, but we made it work. His arm draped over my waist, heavy and warm. I turned into him, tucking my head under his chin. He smelled like cedar and cider and something I couldn't name. I used to watch you in the library, he said after a while, voice muffled against my hair. Senior year. You'd sit by the window with that beat-up copy of The Bell Jar. I'd pretend to study 3 tables away, I laughed softly. I thought you were just avoiding calculus. That too. We talked like that for hours. Quiet, halting confessions traded in the dark. About the parties we'd both been at but never spoken at. About the way he'd driven past my house once, just to see if the light was on in my room. About how I'd saved his yearbook photo in my phone for longer than I'd admit. The sky outside started to pale, gray bleeding into blue. Neither of us had slept. We didn't need to. When the first bird called, Elias pressed a kiss to my temple. I should go, he said, but didn't move. Stay, I said again. He did. Later, when the sun was fully up and the house was stirring with the sounds of coffee and footsteps, we'd have to figure out what this was. How to tell people. How to be in the light after years in the shadows, but for now it was just us, just this. Just the beginning we hadn't dared to name until now, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The graduation cap had left her dark curls in complete disarray, strands sticking out at odd angles like she'd just rolled out of a wind tunnel. She laughed at something her friend shouted from the crowd, tilting her head back, and the sun caught the edges of her smile, bright, unself-conscious, the kind that made you forget there were 100 other people milling around the lawn. I stood frozen near the edge of the folding chairs, clutching a program I hadn't read, watching Elena like I'd done 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never with the full weight of what I felt pressing against my ribs. She was my little sister's best friend. Had been since they were 14, trading secrets and sleeping bags during sleepovers I pretended no end to. Sophia brought her home the way other kids collected strays. Elena, with her paint-stained fingers and quiet intensity, always sketching in the corners of notebooks, always noticing things no one else did. I'd been 22 when they met. 28 now. The math of it had always felt like a warning. But warnings dissolve when someone's looking at you like you're the only real thing in a room full of cardboard cutouts. I didn't plan to cross the grass toward her. My feet just moved. She turned as I approached, surprise flickering across her face before settling into something softer. Recognition. Maybe relief. Luca, she said, and my name in her mouth sounded different than it ever had with Sophia. Less like a big brother. More like a question she'd been waiting to ask. Your hair, I managed, gesturing vaguely. The cap! She reached up self-consciously, then dropped her hand with a laugh. I probably look like I lost a fight with a lawnmower. You look... I swallowed the rest. Beautiful felt too small. Real felt too much. Like you. Her eyes, hazel shot through with gold, searched mine. The crowd noise faded to static. Somewhere behind us, Sophia was calling for pictures, but neither of us moved. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked quietly. "Because I've been looking at you like this for years and you never noticed. Because I used to watch you fall asleep on our couch during movie nights, your head on Sophia's shoulder, and feel something dangerous settle in my chest. Because every time you left our house, the rooms felt too big. I didn't say any of that." Instead, I reached out, slow, giving her every chance to step back, and brushed a curl from her forehead. My fingers lingered against her temple longer than they should have. "Elena," I said, and her name felt like a confession. She didn't pull away. We ended up at the old lake house that night. Sophia's idea, a graduation continuation with cheap wine and a fire pit and too many people who'd known each other since kindergarten. I told myself I'd stay an hour. 2 tops. Elena found me on the dock around midnight, the party noise muffled behind the trees. She carried 2 beers and the kind of quiet that felt deliberate. "Escaping?" she asked, settling beside me. Her knee brushed mine when she sat. Neither of us moved away. "Sophia's trying to make everyone play Never Have I Ever. I'm too old for that level of honesty." She laughed softly. "You're 30, Luca, not dead." Feels like it sometimes. The lake stretched black and endless before us, reflecting a slice of moon. Fireflies blinked in the reeds. Elena picked at the label on her bottle, then set it down untouched. "I used to think you hated me," she said suddenly. I turned to her, startled. "What?" "You were always so careful, like I was made of glass. Or like you were afraid I'd break something if I got too close." I stared at the water. I was afraid I'd break something. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above the lapping waves. "What if I didn't want to be careful anymore?" The air between us changed. Not charged exactly, more like the moment before a storm when everything goes still. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "Elena, I'm not a kid anymore, Luca." She shifted to face me fully, knees drawn up, chin resting on them. "I haven't been for a long time, and I've been waiting for you to notice," I noticed. God, I noticed. The way her tank top slipped off one shoulder in the firelight. The constellation of freckles across her collarbone I'd memorized years ago. The way she said my name like it belonged to her. "I noticed," I said roughly. Sophia is my best friend, not my keeper." She reached out, fingers brushing my wrist. "And you're not her keeper either." Her touch was light, but it burned. I turned my hand palm up, and she traced the lines there like she was reading something written in a language only she understood. "Tell me to stop," she whispered. I didn't. We didn't kiss on the dock. Not then. It felt too exposed, too much like tempting fate with the house full of people who knew our histories. Instead, we talked, really talked, for the first time without the buffer of Sophia or family dinners or the careful distance I'd maintained for years. She told me about art school applications, about the professor who said her work was technically proficient but emotionally vacant. How she'd started painting again after years of nothing, filling canvases with storms and doorways and hands reaching through darkness. "I think I've been painting you," she admitted, cheeks pink in the moonlight. "Not your face, just the shape of how you make me feel, safe and terrified at the same time." I told her about the firm, the promotion I'd turned down because it meant moving to Chicago, the way my apartment felt like a hotel I'd forgotten to check out of, how I'd started running at 5 a.m. just to have somewhere to put all the wanting I couldn't name. When the fire in the pit died to embers and the last car crunched away down the gravel drive, we were still there, shoulders touching, the space between us shrinking with every shared breath. "Come inside," I said finally. "It's getting cold." She followed me through the screen door, past the kitchen where Sophia had left a note about pancakes in the morning, up the stairs that creaked in all the same places they had when we were teenagers. My room was at the end of the hall, Sophia's old one actually, with the slanted ceiling and the window that stuck. Elena paused in the doorway, taking in the familiar space made strange by moonlight and adulthood. I watched her fingers trail over the desk where she'd once helped Sophia with geometry homework, over the bookshelf still holding dog-eared paperbacks and swim team trophies. "I used to fall asleep in here," she said softly, "during storms. Sophia would sneak me in when my mom was working late. I remember." My voice came out rough. "You'd curl up on the window seat with that god-awful purple blanket." She smiled at the memory, then turned to me. The hallway light caught the edges of her hair, turned her eyes luminous. "Luca. 1 step, 2, until we were close enough that I could see the faint scar through her left eyebrow from when she'd fallen off her bike at 12, close enough to count the freckles across her nose. I cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. She leaned into the touch like she'd been waiting years for it. "Are you sure?" I asked. The question trembled between us. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her mouth to mine. "Are you sure?" I asked. The question trembled between us. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her mouth to mine. It wasn't frantic. Wasn't the clumsy collision of pent-up longing I'd half expected. It was slow, deliberate, like we'd both been carrying this moment for so long we were afraid to drop it. Her hands slid under my shirt, palms flat against my back, and I felt the tremor in her fingers that matched the one in my chest. I walked her backward until her knees hit the edge of the bed, until we were sinking down into the quilt that smelled like cedar and summer nights. Every touch was a question, every sigh an answer. When I kissed the hollow of her throat, she arched into me with a sound that wasn't quite a moan, wasn't quite my name. When her nails scored lightly down my spine, I shuddered against her neck. We learned each other in the dark, mapping collarbones and hip bones, the soft skin behind knees, the places that made breath hitch and fingers clutch. There was no rush, no need to prove anything, just the quiet unraveling of years spent pretending. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, her head on my chest, my fingers combing through her hair. The ceiling fan turned lazy circles above us. "I used to imagine this," she whispered into the quiet. "When I was 16 and stupid and thought wanting you made me a bad friend. You're not a bad friend. I'm in bed with my best friend's brother. You're in bed with me." I pressed a kiss to her temple. "And Sophia's going to kill us both." She laughed softly, the sound vibrating against my ribs. "Worth it." Morning came in slices of gold through the blinds. I woke to the weight of her leg thrown over mine, her breath warm against my shoulder. For a moment, I let myself believe this could be simple, that we could stay here, suspended in the lake house's quiet, figuring out the shape of us without the world pressing in. Then Sophia's voice floated up the stairs, bright and oblivious. "Elena, you alive up there? I made chocolate chip pancakes." Elena's eyes snapped open. She stared at the ceiling, then at me, panic flickering across her face. "Shit," she breathed. I sat up, running a hand through my hair. "We should tell her? God, no. Not yet." She was already scrambling for her clothes, hopping into jeans with one leg. "I need time to figure out how to say this without her hating me." "She won't hate you. She might hate you." Elena paused in the doorway, hair wild, lips swollen. "You're her favorite person." "Was." I stood, pulling on boxers. "Now I'm the idiot who made me happier than I've been in years." She crossed the room in 2 steps, kissed me hard and quick. "We'll figure it out, together." She slipped out, barefoot, carrying her shoes. I listened to her pad down the hall, heard Sophia's delighted squeal when she found her, heard the easy rhythm of their friendship pick up right where it left off, like nothing had changed. Everything had. We played it careful for weeks, stolen moments in coffee shops 2 towns over, late-night texts that started innocent and ended with voice memos neither of us could bear to delete. The lake house became our sanctuary. Weekends. When Sophia was at her internship in the city, when we could pretend the world was just water and pine trees and the creak of the old dock under our bare feet. Elena painted me in the mornings, sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows. Not portraits, abstracts, swirls of blue and gold that she said were the color of my voice when I laughed. I cooked her breakfast in nothing but swim trunks, flipping pancakes while she sketched the line of my shoulder blades. We talked about everything, the future, the past, the terrifying middle ground where Sophia lived. I keep waiting for the guilt, Elena said one afternoon, lying on her stomach on the dock, chin propped on her folded arms. It never comes. Because this isn't wrong. I traced the curve of her spine with one finger. It's just complicated. Complicated I can do. Sophia found out in September. We'd been careful. So careful. But careful has limits when you're in love and 23 and can't keep your hands off each other for more than 5 minutes. She walked in on us in the kitchen, Elena's back against the counter, my hands in her hair, the kind of kiss that leaves no room for plausible deniability. The grocery bags hit the floor with a crash of breaking eggs. The silence that followed was worse than screaming. Sophia stared at us, mouth open, eyes wide. Elena stepped forward first, hands raised like she was approaching a spooked horse. "Soph, I can explain." "You're explaining with his tongue down your throat?" "Sophia." My voice cracked on her name. "Let us know." She held up a hand, backing toward the door. "No, I need. I can't." She was gone before we could stop her. The slam of the screen door echoed like a gunshot. Elena cried in the shower that night. Not delicate tears, ugly, wrenching sobs that tore out of her chest and echoed off the tile. I sat on the bathroom floor back against the door, listening to her fall apart. "This is why," she choked out between sobs. "This is why we should have—" "No." I reached under the curtain, found her hand. "This is why we waited. Because it mattered." She emerged eventually, wrapped in a towel, eyes red and swollen. I dried her hair with the same careful attention I'd used the first night, combing through tangles with my fingers. "We're going to fix this," I told her reflection in the mirror. "How?" "By not hiding anymore." We gave Sophia 3 days. 3 days of radio silence, of Elena pacing the lake house like a ghost, of me calling in sick to work because I couldn't concentrate on anything but the way my sister's face had crumpled. On the 4th day, Elena drove to the city. Alone. She came back after midnight, eyes bright with something that wasn't quite hope, but wasn't despair either. She didn't throw anything at me, was the first thing she said. Progress. The conversation. With Sophia took place in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the detritus of post-college life. Empty pizza boxes, half-packed moving boxes, a wilting fern Elena had given her as a housewarming gift. It was messy. There were tears, accusations, questions neither of us had good answers for. "How long?" Sophia kept asking. "How long have you been lying to me?" "We weren't lying," Elena said quietly. "We were, waiting, for the right time. There is no right time for this." But there was. There had to be. Because the alternative was losing everything. Sophia cried hardest when Elena told her about the paintings, about the years of wanting and not saying, about the way I'd looked at her the night of graduation like she was the answer to a question I'd been too afraid to ask. "I thought I was protecting you," I said. My voice was raw. "From me. From this." "You're an idiot," Sophia sniffed. "Both of you." But she hugged Elena when she left. A real hug. The kind that squeezed tight enough to crack ribs. It wasn't fixed. Not completely. There were awkward family dinners and pointed silences and the slow, painful work of rebuilding trust. But Sophia started texting again. Started inviting Elena over for movie nights that sometimes included me. Started looking at us like we were something she could learn to live with. 1 year later, on the anniversary of graduation, we went back to the lake house. Just the three of us this time. Sophia brought her new girlfriend, a quiet sculptor named Maya, who watched our strange little trio with bemused affection. We sat on the dock until the stars came out, passing a bottle of cheap wine and telling stories about the people we'd been before everything changed. To complicated things, Sophia toasted, clinking her bottle against mine and Elena's. And to the idiots who make them work. Elena laughed, the sound bright and real and ours. She leaned into my side, her hand finding mine under the water-slick wood. Later, when Sophia and Maya had gone to bed, Elena and I stayed out until dawn. The lake was glass calm, reflecting the sky like a mirror. "Still worth it?" I asked, echoing her words from a year ago. She turned to me, eyes soft in the pre-dawn light. "Every second." I kissed her then, slow and deep, tasting wine and lake water and the future we'd fought for. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. "Sophia asked me to be her maid of honor," she said suddenly. I blinked. "She and Maya?" "Not yet. But when they do," Elena smiled, small and fierce. "She said family sticks together even when they're idiots." I laughed until my eyes burned, until the sun came up over the water and painted everything gold. Sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who see us most clearly. Sometimes love isn't a lightning strike, it's a slow burn that reshapes everything it touches. Sometimes complicated is just another word for real. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have risked the friendship, the family, the careful lines we'd drawn in the sand? Or would you have stayed safe on the shore, watching the water instead of diving in? I'd love to hear your story.